The wind howled like a banshee, whipping the salty spray against the cold granite walls of the Black Rock lighthouse. For 50 years it had stood sentinel on this jagged outcrop, a beacon against the treacherous waters, and for 50 years it had been home to a darkness that clung to its stones like the persistent sea fog. Young Thomas had taken the keeper's post with a sense of grim duty. His predecessor, Old Man Hemlock, had vanished without a trace 2 weeks prior, leaving behind only a half-eaten meal and a chilling, unfinished logbook entry. The isolation had always been part of the job, but Black Rock offered a different kind of solitude. It was a silence that pressed in, punctuated by the groaning of the tower and the phantom whisper of waves that never quite reached the shore. The first few nights were uneventful, save for the unsettling creaks and groans that Thomas attributed to the storm's fury. He'd climb the winding stairs, his lantern casting dancing shadows, to tend the great lamp, its rhythmic sweep a comforting, if lonely, companion. But then, the whispers began. At first they were faint, indistinguishable from the wind. He'd pause, straining to hear, only for the sound to vanish, leaving him questioning his sanity. He'd dismiss it as fatigue, the result of too much solitude and too little sleep. But the whispers grew bolder, coalescing into what sounded like hushed, desperate pleas. They seemed to emanate from the very walls, a chorus of unseen voices trapped within the stone. One night, as he polished the brass fittings of the lamp, a distinct voice, cold and sharp, cut through the din of the storm. "He's still here," it hissed, right beside his ear. Thomas spun around, his heart hammering against his ribs. The circular room was empty, save for the rotating lens and the vast, inky blackness of the sea beyond the glass. He started seeing things, fleeting shadows at the edge of his vision, figures that dissolved when he turned to look. He'd catch glimpses of them in the polished brass, in the reflective surfaces of the lantern room, always just out of focus, always just beyond reach. They were gaunt, spectral forms, their eyes hollow and accusing. The logbook became his obsession. He'd pore over Hemlock's entries, searching for any clue, any mention of what haunted these shores. Hemlock's handwriting, once neat and precise, devolved into frantic scrawls in the later entries. He wrote of the cold, of the whispers, of a presence that watched him, that tormented him. "It's the drowned," Hemlock had written, the ink smeared as if by trembling fingers. "They want their peace. They want to be free." Thomas found himself haunted by the image of the sea, no longer a source of livelihood, but a gaping maw, a watery grave. He imagined the souls lost to its depths, their bodies broken against the rocks, their spirits tethered to this desolate place. One evening, a particularly violent storm raged. The waves crashed against the lighthouse with a ferocity Thomas had never witnessed. The tower shuddered, and the lantern room swayed precariously. In the midst of the tempest, he saw them clearly for the first time. Standing on the narrow walkway outside, buffeted by the gale, were figures, not shadows this time, but distinct, translucent forms. They were sailors, their clothes tattered, their faces contorted in agony. They reached out towards the lighthouse, their spectral hands grasping at the stone, their mouths opening in silent screams. Thomas stumbled back, his breath catching in his throat. He recognized them from Hemlock's descriptions. The crew of the Sea Serpent, a schooner lost 50 years ago, its entire complement swallowed by the sea. Hemlock had believed their spirits were trapped, forever reliving their final moments. The whispers intensified, no longer pleading but demanding. They clawed at his mind, a cacophony of despair. He could feel their cold, their hunger, their unending torment. He understood now why Hemlock had vanished. The lighthouse wasn't just a beacon. It was a prison, and the spirits were desperate for release. He found himself drawn to the base of the tower, to the small, damp chamber where the foghorn machinery was housed. The air here was heavy, thick with the smell of brine and decay. The whispers were loudest here, a suffocating chorus that vibrated through his bones. He remembered Hemlock's last, barely legible entry. The key. Must find the key. Release them. What key? What release? Thomas searched frantically, his lantern light dancing over the damp stone. He ran his hands over the cold, rough surfaces, feeling for any hidden catch, any loose stone. Then his fingers brushed against something metallic, something lodged deep within a crack in the wall. He pulled, his muscles straining, and with a grating sound a small, tarnished brass locket came free. It was heavy, cold to the touch. As he opened it, a gust of icy wind swept through the chamber, extinguishing his lantern. Darkness descended, absolute and suffocating. The whispers surged around him, no longer desperate, but triumphant. He heard a splash, a gurgling sound, and then silence. The next morning, the storm had abated. The sun, a pale disk in the bruised sky, cast a weak light on the Blackrock lighthouse. The sea was calm, its surface like polished obsidian. Inside, the lighthouse was empty. The great lamp stood cold and dark. The logbook lay open on the desk, its pages undisturbed. But at the base of the tower, nestled amongst the barnacle-encrusted rocks, was a small, tarnished brass locket. It lay open, revealing two faded portraits within. A handsome young man and a beautiful woman, their smiles frozen in time. And on the smooth gray stones, barely visible, were the faint, translucent footprints of a man walking into the sea, his face at peace. The drowned had finally found their release, and the Blackrock lighthouse was silent once more, waiting for its next keeper.